a market for this type of argument in the Republican Party. So I think the margin will certainly determine the tone of her speech, but win or lose, she is going to look forward and not look backward. Anderson?
Jeff, that is probably the greatest backdrop I've seen in a long time. Why don't we all live in Wyoming?
It certainly is great. I've been here several days, and I can tell you it's fantastic.
My gosh, wow, amazing. Jeff Zeleny, appreciate it, thanks. If you ever miss 360, you can always listen to our podcast. Go to cnn.com/podcast or any of the major platforms. Just search for Anderson Cooper 360. That's it for us. The news continues. I want to hand it over to Allison Camerata, CNN Tonight. Allison?
Anderson, thank you very much. I'm Allison Camerata, and this is CNN Tonight. 9 o'clock on the East Coast, 7 o'clock in Wyoming, where as of this moment, the polls are now closed. And Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney awaits her fate. Cheney, of course, has become the face of Republican resistance to Donald Trump and his efforts to deny Joe Biden's presidential victory. Donald Trump also awaits his fate, in a way, as investigations into his actions heat up. We have new developments on the search of his Mar-a-Lago home and those boxes of classified documents. But let's start with tonight's primary. Wyoming is the least populous state, but tonight it's the most popular for election watchers. We will have results coming in throughout this hour, so keep it right here and we will keep you updated. Congresswoman Cheney is the last of the so-called impeachment 10. Those are the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach President Trump after the insurrection. 7 of them have either lost their primaries or chosen not to run for re-election. 2 of them won, and then there's Cheney. You may remember that Congresswoman Cheney was booted from her leadership post in the Republican conference more than a year ago after trying to warn the country about the threat she believes Donald Trump poses to democracy. Since then, she has continued to try to sound the alarm and call out her colleagues.
To my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible, there will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
None of that has endeared her to Republicans in her home state. If Congresswoman Cheney manages to somehow pull off a win tonight against her Trump-backed challenger, Harriet Hageman, she will have defied long odds. But win or lose, CNN has learned that Congresswoman Cheney intends to make a speech tonight saying that her battle has just begun. She started talking about that this morning.
Well, look, I think today, no matter what the outcome is certainly the beginning of a battle that is going to continue and is going to go on. We're facing a moment where our democracy really is under attack and under threat.
So advisors tell us that Cheney's been working on her speech for several days and is crafting a blunt warning about the danger of misinformation and lies. Her aides say she will outline a plan to, quote, stay in the fight against Donald Trump and intends to wear the outcome of this primary, win or lose, as a, quote, badge of conviction. There's also been a lot of talk about whether Liz Cheney wants to run for president in 2024. We hear she's not expected to give a firm answer, but she's not ruling it out. So let's turn to Chief National Correspondent John King, anchor of Inside Politics. He is standing by at the magic wall waiting for the election results to come in. John, what are you seeing?
Allison, you see Wyoming on the map. It is gray. We're waiting for the first votes to come in. But before I zoom in on the state, these are the primaries so far. After tonight, about a handful of states left to hold their primaries. You see, these are House districts. You see all that salmon color on the map? Those are candidates endorsed by Donald Trump. Donald Trump continues to have giant sway in the Republican Party, especially in these conservative House races. So now we're going to pull up to Wyoming's first and only congressional district. It's a statewide, one congressperson from the state of Wyoming. It's Cheney versus Harriet Hageman, as you noted, but this is Cheney versus Trump. How can Liz Cheney be in trouble? You just saw the photograph of her standing with her father, the former vice president and the former congressman from Wyoming, the former defense secretary from Wyoming. The Cheney brand used to be gold in Wyoming, right? Liz Cheney came to Washington with Donald Trump in 2016, 40% in her first primary, 68% in her second primary, 73% in the Republican primary just 2 years ago. So Republicans in Wyoming love, or at least loved, Liz Cheney. What happened? Let's move from this map to this map. She defied Donald Trump. She stood up to him and voted to impeach him. She stood up to him and joined as vice chair of the January 6th committee. Donald Trump, 70% in Wyoming in 2020. You see only 2 blue counties. That's Liz Cheney's only hope. Are there enough Democrats? Are there enough independents who will switch parties? You have to change your registration to vote as a Republican. There are indications that there's been a lot of that happening in Wyoming, but is it enough? Allison, look at the map. Look at all this red. Liz Cheney understands the odds are overwhelming, which is why she's writing that defiant speech. She expects, when we come back to this map tonight, by the time all the votes are counted, that'll be salmon.
Yeah, I'm no mathematician, but that map looked very red. John, thank you very much, and we'll come back to you, of course, as the results come in. So joining me now is Chris Wallace, host of CNN's Who's Talking to Chris Wallace, also our chief political correspondent and State of the Union co-anchor, Dana Bash, and our CNN political commentator, Scott Jennings. Guys, great to have you here as we await the results there. Chris, what are you watching for tonight?
Well, frankly, unless there's a political earthquake, excuse me, and we don't expect there to be, and that Liz Cheney is going to lose, her statement, her speech, and what she lays out as her path going forward. Clearly, it's going to be a call to arms against Donald Trump. What's her role in that army? Is she, how is she, what is she going to say? I don't expect her to say, I'm going to run for president tonight, but how is she going to lay out the way that she is going to oppose Donald Trump and try to prevent him from being, first of all, the Republican nominee, secondly, the next president of the United States over the next 2 years?
Scott, if she loses her seat, what can her role in that army be?
Well, it makes sense to me that she would run for president. She's raised a ton of money into a federal account, which can be used in another federal account. President's a federal office. So I think she has the capacity to mount a campaign for president, although it would be as much of a long shot to get the Republican nomination in 24 as it has been to win this primary in 2022. But if she, it strikes me that this is more than just a vote for her, the impeachment vote. This is a crusade. And if she wants to keep that going, that is the next most obvious thing that you would do. And obviously she would garner all kinds of national media attention and political attention. And she seems to think it's her life's work, the culmination of her life's work, keep Donald Trump out of the White House. So that's what I'm expecting to hear tonight. Something short of a campaign, but something obviously building toward it.
And she's already started talking about it in that clip from earlier this evening when she talked about the beginning. This is the beginning. That is the kind of tone and tenor that we're hearing from inside her camp. It is what she has been sort of pretty much screaming from the rooftops since she made a very clear decision to be the anti-Donald Trump, not just to even be against him, but to call him out before the January 6th committee, and then, of course, using her perch on that panel as well. So she clearly has decided that Wyoming is likely behind her right now, and she's looking on a national level to be the most prominent voice she can be to speak out against Trumpism and everything that he represents that she thinks is hurting the party that her family has been such a prominent part of.
And Allison, not to be too cynical about it, but in a town, Washington, where people so much seem to play to what's to their personal advantage, you do, the line badge of her conviction, you do have to give her credit for the fact that obviously, if you like Donald Trump, you're not going to like what she's doing. But she has thrown away a really stellar congressional career. She was the #3 Republican in the House of Representatives, the real possibility of eventually becoming the first Republican House Speaker. And she decided Donald Trump was more important than any of that. I mean, she could have just stayed silent like a lot of other people and secretly whispered, God, I really don't like this, but I'm not going to say anything about it. She didn't. She stood up.
It's a good point, Chris, because it has made her somewhat politically homeless. So all sorts of Democrats, as you all know, really like Liz Cheney right now. But
I can't believe that they're saying that.
They can't believe it. But there are definitely a contingent that switched party registration to vote for her today. But their love only goes so far. I mean, last night I spoke to one of them, a lifelong Democrat who switched her party registration. And I said, so what, would you vote for her for president? And here is the response. Would you vote for her for president?
I doubt that very much. I don't think that I would.
And so there you go. I mean, so they love her today, but they won't love her tomorrow.
I mean, this is the thing about Liz Cheney. She's quite conservative. I mean, her voting record, her entire career, and when she was in the House, while Donald Trump was in office, she voted with his position 90-something% of the time. I mean, this is a doctrinaire conservative. So it's not like she's gone off the reservation on issues. She has gone off the reservation on one thing, and that is her attitude and disposition towards Trump and making her crusade, getting rid of Trump out of politics. That I actually think she could have survived the impeachment vote if she had just done what others have done, which is, just kind of ignore it just put it behind her. But that wasn't her choice, and I think she knew up front what the reckoning would be in Wyoming, but she's obviously got bigger things in mind.
Well, we also talked to a Republican last night who isn't going to vote for her because she felt that Liz Cheney had basically left the state behind, that she no longer represented the people of Wyoming and that she wasn't focused on sort of their needs. So here's that moment.
While she has been a very conservative vote in the legislature, she just seems to be swinging a little bit more toward the left. But even before that, in the last couple of years, it just does not feel like she really represents the state anymore.
I mean, so did she make this too much about Trump? Was there any way to thread that needle and be again, speak out for what she thought the ills of Donald Trump were, but to also deliver for her home state?
Let's be clear. Liz Cheney has not moved to the left. This isn't about left or right. This is about Donald Trump or not. That's what it is. And yeah, it is true. If you think about it through that prism, it is true that she doesn't represent Wyoming, which is a state where Donald Trump won in 2020. He had the biggest margin there than any other state, like by far. West Virginia, I think, was second. And what that tells you is that Wyoming is Trump country and it's not Cheney country. And so that's why she made the decision, the very knowledgeable decision, intentional decision to do what she did, knowing that it could be, to use your term, a suicide mission.
Chris, let's look at the scorecard of the so-called impeachment 10 and what their fates have been. So of the people, the Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump, I mean, basically, the bottom line is that Donald Trump vanquished most of them.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, there's an even stronger indication than that. The Washington Post had a fascinating story today where they looked at all of the battleground states and all of the primary races. 54 of the 87 GOP nominees in battleground states in offices, either state, local, or federal, that would have some say in the next election are, to some degree or another, election deniers. So I mean, that's very much who's going to be on the ballot for Republicans in November, for governor, for secretary of state, for a lot of these key races that'll affect the 2024 election. They are election deniers. They are Trump supporters.
Scott, as a Republican, what do you think that means for your party and your country?
Well, I mean, I tend to believe Donald Trump today is the most likely Republican to win the nomination in 24, but the least likely Republican to recapture the White House. And I think prior to this FBI issue, I think some Republicans were starting to prepare themselves to turn the page on it. There's been maybe a temporary snapback to him, a reflexive defensiveness. But I think if the Republican Party wants to win back the White House and beat Joe Biden or whoever runs, it probably should look elsewhere. Donald Trump's never won the popular vote, and I don't think his prospects have gotten any better since the last time he tried.
Do you think the election denialism only applies to him, or is that now fundamental, that Republicans, the 2/3 that Chris is talking about, won't believe outcomes if it doesn't go their way now?
I mean, I think there are a lot of Republicans who don't believe in the outcomes. Respectfully, there are a bunch of Democrats who don't think Donald Trump won the 2016 election fair and square either. And there were a lot of Democrats who didn't think George W. Bush won fairly in 2000 or 2004.
But that's because they didn't win the popular votes, not because they think that there was massive fraud.
You don't think Democrats still today cling to the idea that somehow Donald Trump had help winning the 2016 election?
I think it's different. I think it's different than what the election
I don't. I mean, as a Republican, I don't.
You can't compare that to what we saw in 2020. You can't compare that to 2020.
I'm not comparing it, but I think we have been on a 20-year escalator of people increasingly denying outcomes of elections. It got as hot as it's ever been in 20, and I think in 2024, there'll be Republicans who wouldn't accept it if Joe Biden wins again, and there'll be Democrats who wouldn't accept it if Donald Trump or any other Republican.
I remember when Joe Biden was in the January 6th hearing in Congress where they were counting the electoral vote, and some Democrats were objecting to Donald Trump, and he shut them down. I mean, it's really, I understand what you're saying, but it's apples and oranges compared to what it went on in 20. I mean, we're talking about a concerted effort to overturn the election in 2020.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I don't think you can deny the 20-year escalator that we have been on, where partisans have increasingly been willing to disregard the outcome of the election in favor of their own partisan instincts. And it got as bad as it's ever been in 20. My fear is it's going to happen again no matter who wins.
One of the differences, not the only, one of the differences is what the candidate says. There are always going to be supporters. You've been on campaigns, I'm sure, where they just don't accept the results. It's different when the candidate, especially when it is the president, says, no, I'm not going to accept it, and has a concerted effort.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
and
quickly.
what has Hillary Clinton said, even as early as late as this year, about the 2016 election, that it was stolen from me. So look, I'm not trying to compare it because it got as bad as it's ever gotten, and January 6th was a travesty. I'm not convinced we're not still on that escalator, and we don't know.
Oh, it feels like we are on a runaway
Right about that.
escalator, certainly in terms of the slate of election deniers. Friends, thank you very much. Please stay close because we will be getting results in by the minute. So there are brand new developments about the classified documents being stored in Donald Trump's basement. What did investigators see on surveillance video that alarmed them so much? We'll be right back. There are multiple criminal investigations currently involving Donald Trump, and some of them are overlapping. But let's start with what the Department of Justice describes as the highly classified documents that were being stored at Mar-a-Lago. CNN has learned the FBI interviewed two former White House lawyers, Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin, before executing the search warrant on the former president's home. And it turns out that they were among a group of 7 aides appointed by President Trump in one of his last actions as president to handle his presidential documents. I'm joined now by former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Elliot Williams. Guys, great to have you here, Elliot. Yeah. If Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin were tasked with being in charge of the presidential records and the classified documents, aren't they in trouble today?
You know, they may not be in trouble today because they may have been doing their jobs and attempting to advise their colleagues to not break the law, right? And so they can provide a tremendous amount of very valuable information as to how documents were stored there, who did what, who saw what. I don't think they're in trouble just yet.
Okay, so in terms of who saw what, Maggie Haberman at the Times, and our colleague, reports that investigators obtained surveillance footage of the hallway outside of the storage room at Mar-a-Lago and saw something that alarmed them. And that's what sped up the process for getting the search warrant. What could they have seen on that tape, Andrew?
Well, this gets to the core of what a counterintelligence investigation actually is. And the purpose of a CI investigation is to mitigate a potential threat to national security. It's not to throw someone in jail or to see somebody prosecuted. That can happen, but the primary purpose is to mitigate a threat. In this case, it's very logical that they would want to see that surveillance tape to understand the entire universe of people who might have had access to that room. And if they were concerned by what they saw, that is not a good sign. It means they saw someone potentially accessing that room who should not have been there, maybe even someone who the Trump attorneys that they were dealing with wasn't aware of who was accessing the room. So this is why you don't take top secret documents to someplace like Mar-a-Lago that's not approved for that sort of storage, because you can put that stuff at risk simply by the people that have access to it.
Elliot, Maggie Haberman is also reporting that when Donald Trump's advisors repeatedly tried to get him to turn over the documents to this tranche of classified documents to the National Archives, he told them, quote, "It's not theirs, it's mine." Actually, it's ours. Yeah. The American people own the presidential documents. I mean, those are historical for posterity records.
Look, it's a gross misunderstanding of how records are kept in government. I know this. You knew this as a senior official in government, that you turn over your documents at the end. And as a president of the United States or a senior White House staffer, there are additional rules governing how you ought to hand documents over. They belong to the American people, number one, as just sort of a body of documents generally. Then on top of that, some of those are classified documents. And as you know, as I know from having worked with classified materials, they never have any place outside of a secure facility, never belong in a private home, even if you are a former president of the United States.
But what do you say to his argument that he had declassified them?
Well, but he didn't, and he couldn't, because so just think about it this way: each document maybe declassifies future ones down the road. So if he declassifies a piece of paper, there's probably 10,000 other pieces of paper around the country that are relying on that one for their own classification level. So if there's a document in some other DOJ office somewhere in Fresno, is that declassified now too? It makes no sense, and he couldn't just issue a blanket order.
And think about when we know he actually did want things declassified, he asked others to do it. He had John Ratcliffe as DNI declassify documents that he wanted released. He had Richard Grinnell as acting DNI do the same thing. And the reason you have someone do it and go through the procedures is because you need other people to start treating that material as declassified. So simply having the thought in your head as president and not communicating it to anyone else doesn't get the job done.
To be clear, look, he has the power to some extent to declassify things, just like he has the power to pardon and do other things. But we as a government put checks on presidents and people in power so that mistakes and abuses like this don't happen.
So, Andrew, explain this. So now Patrick Cipollone and Patrick Philbin are involved in this classified documents investigation, as well as the DOJ investigation of January 6th. So just explain how complicated that is as an investigator, how you keep different investigations separate when some of the same witnesses and players are involved.
It's incredibly complicated. So you have entirely different streams of investigative activity, likely overseen by different line prosecutors and most likely being actually worked on the ground level by different agents and with different supervisors, all convening in on the same witnesses. It's absolutely essential that that stuff is coordinated at the very top. You don't want to keep asking Pat Cipollone or Patrick Philbin to come in on multiple occasions to answer different questions from different groups. You try to package all those things together into longer sessions of interviews in one shot.
Okay, they have their work cut out for them.
They do.
Andrew McCabe, Elliot Williams, thank you so much. Okay, so we've heard from Trump in statements online, but few people can guess what's going on in his mind right now. Better than our next guest. We go one-on-one with Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. Ahead. Okay, this just in, the first results from the Wyoming Republican House primary are in. 5% of the vote is now in. It's a small number, but Hageman starts out with a lead of about 600 votes. So obviously they will continue to come in minute by minute. We'll keep an eye on it, and we will check in with John King shortly. Okay, but first, Donald Trump has skirted legal trouble many times before. From the Stormy Daniels scandal to his 2 impeachment trials, Trump has survived virtually unscathed. But now 2 grand juries are impaneled, 2 of his own former lawyers have been ordered to testify in investigations, and his aides are being interviewed under oath by prosecutors. Is this the closest Donald Trump has come to real trouble? Donald Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, went to prison for, as he says, doing Donald Trump's dirty deeds, meaning writing a hush money check to Stormy Daniels, who said she had an affair with Donald Trump. He's now the host of the Mea Culpa podcast, and he also has an upcoming book out, which goes on sale October 11th. It's called Revenge: How Donald Trump Weaponized the Department of Justice Against His Critics. Michael, great to have you here in studio.
Good to see you, Allison.
So what about that premise? Is this the closest that Donald Trump has come to being in real legal trouble?
It's certainly the closest I've ever seen him come. As you know, Donald Trump has been like the Teflon Don. It appears now things have changed. You know, one of the things that Donald has been so cautious about his entire life, he took the suggestions of Roy Cohn. Never have your fingerprints on anything, which is why he's never had an email address. He never texted, very little in writing. But everything that's going on now, especially when you're with government, everything is documented. And so, including like the conversation with Brad Raffensperger, including the conversation he had with me about making a payment, and that one was for Karen McDougal, which was not made by me. It was made by AMI and David Pecker, National Enquirer. Yeah. But we're at a situation now where the documentary evidence and the recordings and all of the information really appear to be closing in on him.
Let's talk about the classified documents that were apparently being stored in the basement in a storage room at Mar-a-Lago. You've been to Mar-a-Lago many times?
Yes.
Were you aware that there was a safe or a storage room or a surveillance camera there?
Well, I knew there were cameras because, that's something that, Matt Calamari at the Trump Organization does. They put cameras everywhere in all the buildings and all of the Trump properties.
Why do they do that?
Security. And it's the right thing to do for, for members of a club like that. But I never knew about the basement. I never knew that he had a safe, which is, very interesting that whoever the informant was knew exactly where to go, knew exactly the information that was there, both in the safe and in the storage area.
And what does that tell you?
Well, to me, I believe, and I said, it's my personal opinion, I believe it's Jared Kushner. I believe that only family would know the existence of a safe, let alone the contents of that safe. And so, who else could it possibly be? He doesn't trust Don Jr. He's made it crystal clear, I write about it in the book, that Don is the worst judgment of anyone he's ever met. Eric, I could understand, may possibly know, but Ivanka and Jared as a team, especially since Jared was what? The secretary of everything?
So basically you're suggesting, but we don't have any evidence of this, that it's somebody in his close circle and it's somebody in his family. And what would Donald Trump's mindset be tonight, knowing that there are people who know this information that are cooperating with the FBI?
This is a real problem for him. You see, Donald Trump is like First Avenue when it comes to loyalty. It's one way, right? And he's the most disloyal human being that you'll ever meet, but he expects 100% loyalty from everyone around him. Now that his inner circle is in his mind, who is it that is providing information to the FBI? Who is it that's creating this headache for him? This is driving him crazy because he can't figure it out, but he knows it has to be someone in that inner circle, and he really doesn't have anybody outside of that circle to trust.
Why do you think he had 20 boxes of classified top secret? I mean, these things were designated as top secret or even higher sensitive compartmented info. What was he going to do with that info?
Well, first of all, shouldn't everybody be keeping it in the basement of Mar-a-Lago, right? I mean, you're asking the exact question that I was hoping everybody would ask, why? And I'll tell you, my belief is that he was going to use it as a bargaining chip, as a get-out-of-jail-free card.
What does that mean?
Well, the second that they would put him in handcuffs, he would turn around and say, you don't seem to understand. I have the documentation showing, for example, where our nuclear launch pads are or where other information, sensitive national security information. This is what I believe. And he would use it and say, if you proceed with this, I'm telling you right now, there's 20 of my loyal supporters. You don't know who they are, but we will release that information to Russia, to Iran, to whoever it might be, because he doesn't care about this country. I've been saying that forever. The whole presidential election was supposed to be the greatest infomercial in the history of American politics, which he just happened to win.
But knowing him as you do, in other words, you don't think these were just mementos. He wasn't just keeping Kim Jong-un's love letter as a memento.
I'm sure some of it was Kim Jong-un love letters, or a letter he may have received from Vladimir Putin about his Miss Universe pageant, something that he could show off if he ever felt he needed to have that document. But I believe that the sensitive information that's there was used or was going to be used by him as a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Just to recap, the FBI searched your office, as you well remember, as well as the home and our office of Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Rudy Giuliani, Jeffrey Clark. You and I have talked about this before. Why do so many people around Donald Trump get into trouble, into legal trouble, but he doesn't?
Yeah, because, he doesn't put his fingerprints on anything, and the rest of us are just stupid. Our job is, well, mine was, to protect him at all costs, whatever it is that he needed to do. And he didn't come out and make overt statements like, Michael, this is what I need you to do. He would speak in code. This can't happen. And so you go out and you run into the fire for him to protect him, yet he's the one that started the fire. And he doesn't care if you get burned or not.
Michael, it's always insightful to talk to you. Great to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good to see you, Allison.
Okay, so the first numbers are coming in as Congresswoman Liz Cheney awaits her fate in Wyoming. John King is at the Magic Wall, and we are live at Cheney headquarters, so keep it right here. Okay, we're watching the first numbers come in from Wyoming as Liz Cheney faces the real possibility of losing her congressional seat. Harriet Hageman, the Trump-backed challenger, is off to an early lead. So let's check back in with John King at the Magic Wall. John, what are you seeing?
The first results are what we expected to watch. Still a lot of counting to do, but Harriet Hageman, the Trump-backed candidate, pulls out to an early lead. That's a pretty comfortable lead, but again, only about 6% of the estimated votes. So we have a long way to count. But if you are Harriet Hageman, what did you want to see? You wanted to see your color come in as the first results come in. Only results from 2 counties so far. Number 1, Natrona County here, and you see it's 53-45. 54-45 if you round that up. That's a big lead, but this one here, you get into the more rural areas, look at that, 77 to 15%. These 2 counties, Allison, make up about 23% of the statewide population. No giant cities, if you will, in Wyoming. Long way to go. We still need Teton County where Jackson is. We need to come down here where Cheyenne is, 6%. But if you're Liz Cheney, if you were going to surprise people, you wanted to see it from the beginning, a lot of counting to do, but this map so far filling in as everyone expected.
Back with you. Let's check in now with CNN's Jeff Zeleny. He's live at Cheney headquarters in Jackson, Wyoming. So what's the mood?
Allison, good evening. I don't know if you can hear the music behind me here, but there's some country western music playing. And I'll say the mood is actually quite celebratory, but there is a bit of an anticlimactic feel about the outcome of the primary. As John was just talking about, the numbers coming in now at the moment are not favoring Liz Cheney, but talking to people here and Cheney supporters throughout the day, they're focused on what is coming next. And that's what I'm told her speech is going to be about tonight. Turning the page, looking ahead, they certainly are not acknowledging defeat or conceding defeat by any stretch. But the speech this evening here outside Jackson is going to be about continuing the battle against Donald Trump. So the margin of the victory for Harriet Hageman, if she has one, is going to be something that Cheney folks are watching. But the bigger question is, what is she going to do next if she falls short tonight? So I'm not sure I can recall an election night party where a candidate is losing, but there is such a celebratory mood because there really is a sense of what is next for Liz Cheney if she does not win tonight. So this certainly is an arc of the Cheney family. I'm told all of the Cheneys will be here tonight. Former President Dick Cheney, Lynn Cheney, her mother, her sister as well. So it's a very Wyoming picturesque evening, as you can see here. And the Cheney supporters are waiting for the final outcome and her speech.
That doesn't even look real, Jeff. It looks like your backdrop is so majestic, it looks painted. But tell us, what's the crowd like right now? I mean, how many people are there? Is it packed? What's the scene?
Look, there are a lot of people here, dozens and dozens, maybe a couple hundred people or so, listening to music, having some light bites, having a few drinks on this really beautiful summer evening. And again, there is a sense of some longtime Cheney friends have driven from across the state and certainly from this area where the Cheney family has lived for quite some time. So people have driven from Casper, where the Cheneys grew up, both Lynn and Dick Cheney. So there definitely is a sense of, I don't sense a dispirited sense in the crowd at all, a sense of possibility for what she may do next if she falls short here. So basically, it's an evening picnic, kind of a festivity here. But the outcome, even if she doesn't seem to win, again, wondering what her speech will say and what she'll do, perhaps run for 2024 or not. I'm told she will not make a specific declaration of that, but certainly a festive mood about what her future might be, Allison.
Okay, really interesting. Jeff Zeleny, thank you very much. Thanks to John King as well. Stand by. We're keeping a close watch on Wyoming, and what happens there tonight could add to a trend, and that is election deniers winning primaries around the nation. What does that mean for our democracy and the risk of more chaos, like what we saw on January 6th? All that's next. We could soon learn if Congresswoman Liz Cheney will survive her primary challenge from Harriet Hageman. If Hageman wins, that is yet another primary victory for a 2020 election denier. And she would join a wave of election deniers who are now just one election away from gaining power over election results in battleground states. As Chris Wallace noted earlier, a Washington Post analysis finds that nearly 2/3 of the current nominees for everything from governor to secretary of state have questioned the results of the race Joe Biden won.
Anybody who was involved in that corrupt, shady, shoddy election of 2020, lock them up.
I believe it was stolen, yeah.
The election was rigged.
We know it, and they know it. Donald Trump won.
Half of the nation believes that this election was stolen from President Trump, and I agree with that.
Okay, let's bring in our guests right now to talk about this. We have Dana Bash again. We have John Avlon joining us and Scott Jennings. So Scott, I know that we talked about this earlier in the hour, but I had to bring you back because you didn't answer my critical question, which is what happens when a full slate of election deniers win? I know that you said that you've seen it on both sides and that we've been on this escalator for a long time, but what happens when they're in charge of the levers of election results?
Yeah, it's actually quite worrisome because we saw, and there's been some reporting on some of the efforts that occurred between Election Day and Inauguration Day, trying to copy the voting machines in Georgia and some different states. I mean, obviously, there are people who want to relitigate this or worse, once they take these offices. It's a dead end. I mean, it's a dead end for the Republican Party to make this the core animating issue of the party. And it's worrisome that we could conduct a free and fair election. You could have outcomes and people would just simply deny those outcomes or disregard those outcomes. I mean, it's just not the way it works, not the way it's supposed to work. And it is a dead end for the Republican Party, in my opinion, not just this year, but as we go to 2024.
Yeah, but it's not just theoretical. It's happening. I mean, Dana, let me just show you the slate. This is just Arizona. Let's just look at Arizona for one example. The entire slate of people who would be in charge of elections. So here are the election deniers who've won their primaries already, okay? So from the governor, Kari Lake, Blake Masters, U.S. Senate, Mark Fitzgerald, who we'll get to in a minute, and then also for the attorney general. So every single person who would be overseeing it. And, next time around, Donald Trump. I mean, in other words, they'll find fraud next time around because they'll fabricate it.
And there's something else, and that is states like Arizona have changed their election laws since the 2020 election to make it effectively, in a lot of ways, easier to overturn the election. So it's giving the people who are, you just put up on the screen, who are election deniers, more leeway to do what Doug Ducey didn't do, for example, the current governor of Arizona, because he said he couldn't do it because the law didn't allow him to, and on down. Same in Georgia. Georgia, we know, is a place where the former president and people who were around him tried to overturn the election. He said it. He said it on tape, looking for 11,000 plus votes. It didn't happen because the law didn't allow it to happen and because people stood in the way, like Governor Kemp and others. The law has changed and gives the legislature more power to overturn and step on the Secretary of State.
But in Georgia, the center held. Ratzenberger was reelected. Kemp was reelected against that pressure. What's happening in Arizona is something very different. I mean, this is a Republican Party that views former favorite son John McCain as an apostate, right? And that's a sign of a real problem. That's a sign of a real sickness. The really telling thing about that two-thirds stat is that it's in battleground states. That's not the total number, right? Those are the people that these battleground state GOPs, where you need to win over the reasonable edge of the opposition, you need to win over the purple state, are playing to the base in such a way that it has huge implications not only for 22, but for the integrity of elections. And what Kari Lake and co are saying is an election is a fraud unless I win.
That's right.
That's not democracy.
John, I'm very interested to hear you say this because, as you know, you have often told me it's not as dire as I think it is. But you've come around.
No, I'm still a determined optimist because I don't see the point in being anything else. But
because it's called evidence, John. It's evidence. They're winning now. But back when you and I used to have this theoretical discussion, you were like, but don't worry, they haven't won the primary yet. They have now.
They have.
They're getting one election away.
But that doesn't mean they win the general election. And, we were talking to Scott, Mitch McConnell and the Senate Democrats should remember in 2010 when, Sharon Angles and the Todd Akins and the Christine O'Donnells, when the Republican Party puts forward extremists in swing states, it usually doesn't end well. Now, we'll see what the overall turnout map in off-year midterm election is. But that's the problem. Now, if they do win, then that's bad for not only the Republican Party, but democracy to have election deniers in place. But it's probably bad news for the Republican Party in the short run.
Yeah, these purple states that are extraordinarily close, we do have some candidate challenges. I actually think all these states are going to be quite close, whether the candidacies are, high quality or low quality. I think we're in for close elections in Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania. I mean, a lot of these states, which actually makes me quite concerned about what the period between November and January is going to look like. Because if we had extremely close races across the country, I think it's pretty predictable what's going to happen. We're going to be fighting over vote counts for many, many weeks. And so we got to hope. Look, all anybody wants is for the people who cast votes fairly to have those votes counted fairly. I mean, that's what anybody should want, and that sounds pretty simple, but it won't be that simple, I guess, in the end.
Dana, let's just zero in on Mark Fitcham. He's in Arizona. He's a self-proclaimed member of the far-right extremist group, the Oath Keepers, and he's filled with anti-government conspiracy theories. Our investigative team, the K-File, uncovered a Pinterest account in which he has collected a treason watch list, as he calls it on there, filled with government officials and Nazi imagery. And so, what if he wins?
It's scary. I mean, it just is, not because of his ideology on, not his philosophy on policy, on taxes, on government spending, on basics. It's that stuff. That is scary, scary stuff. That is the kind of thing that would have gotten him ostracized, pushed out of any normal conversation, normal political discourse, never mind elected office like this, not that long ago. And there he is.
You don't hire an arsonist to run the fire department.
Yeah, and it's all part and parcel of what we've been talking about tonight, which is Liz Cheney's race. I mean, it's seen, sometimes I think we focus it on Liz Cheney and her political future, but this is all connected because her opponent is an election denier.
Yeah.
And so this is happening before
and
our
that's
eyes
a feature,
tonight.
not a bug within the Republican base. The problem is, and we're going to see what happens with Liz Cheney here, but it's not for nothing that two of the 10 House members who voted to impeach Donald Trump who survived were in top 2 primaries, right, where you had a more representative election, right, because you get independents vote and Democrats and all that. It's these close partisan primaries, these low turnouts. That's when folks can hijack elections, and you get these unrepresentative results. If Liz Cheney had, would she win a general election? I don't know, but I think she'd have a better shot than winning a close partisan primary that's going to be lower turnout.
Okay, friends, thank you very much. We will have a quick update on the vote in Wyoming. 8% of the vote is in now, and Harriet Hageman is leading with 60% of that vote. We will keep an eye on it, and we will be right back. Thanks for watching tonight, everyone. Join me tomorrow in the CNN newsroom with Victor Blackwell from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern. And I'll be back here tomorrow night. And with that, Don Lemon Tonight starts right now. All yours, Don.
Thank you very much, Alison Cameron. I would love to talk to you, but I've got Mr. John King standing by, so know.
That's important.
That's important. He's at the big board, so.
Yeah, gotcha. I'll let you go.
Okay. Thanks, Alison. I'll see you later. Big night. This is Don Lemon Tonight. Thank you so much for watching. We've got 3 big stories tonight that all intersect, and I'll explain in just a moment if you'll bear with me. Right now, we are standing by for what's expected to be a doozy of a speech tonight from Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is fighting for her political life in Wyoming against the latest beneficiary of the Trump revenge tour, and that is Harriet Hageman. Aides say that the Congresswoman, who is, by the way, the vice chair of the January 6th committee, is going to make the case that she is at the beginning of the battle. And she's going to drop a blunt message, a message warning about the danger to America from misinformation and lies. Remember what she told CNN earlier this month about the threat from the former president? Here it is.
If defending the Constitution against the threat that he poses means losing a House seat, then that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make. I don't intend to lose, but some things are more important than any individual office or political campaign.
So that's Wyoming. We're also going to take you to Alaska right now. Votes are still being cast there, where the former president is trying to take down Senator Lisa Murkowski for the unpardonable sin, to him anyway, of voting to convict him in his second impeachment trial. Now, make no mistake, though, this is no ordinary primary night. What we're learning tonight and the new revelations today about the January 6th investigation could have a big impact on what direction this country might take in the midterms and beyond into 2024 and beyond that, I should say. So this is a big deal. There's a Trump factor, the stranglehold the former president still seems to have on the GOP, and whether the legal cloud hanging over him has actually enhanced his control over the party. There are too many people who don't have the courage that we have seen from Liz Cheney, who will tie themselves up into knots to defend the former president.
It concerns everybody if you see some agents go rogue.
They want Donald Trump arrested. They want him charged right now. They wanted him charged months ago, years ago.
We have this list from the FBI, but we don't have conclusive as to whether or not this actually is classified material.
So still, the basic questions unanswered. What is in the documents? Why did the former president take them and then hold on to them in the first place? And what made the FBI move so urgently to get them back? Just today, we learned the FBI interviewed former White House lawyers Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin earlier this year as part of the criminal investigation of possible mishandling of classified information and obstruction. That is, the FBI finds 11 sets of classified documents, including some marked top secret SCI, one of the highest levels of classification in its search of Mar-a-Lago. Now, a federal judge in Florida will be holding a hearing on Thursday on request to unseal the affidavit used in that search. And the many, many investigations just keep rolling on. Tomorrow, Trump's #1 defender, Rudy Giuliani, has been ordered to appear before a Georgia grand jury investigating whether the former president and his allies violated the law in their efforts to overturn the election results in Georgia. That after prosecutors told him he is now a target of the grand jury. And in the face of all of that, with the midterms looming, President Joe Biden notches a big win, signing a sweeping $750 billion health care tax and climate bill. His former boss calling it a BFD. But can Biden and his party show that they've done enough for the American people to decide to keep them in control come November? That remains to be seen, and we'll discuss all of that tonight. I want to get straight to John King. He's at the Magic Wall for us tonight. As the votes come in, Caitlin Collins is at the White House. Jessica Snyder has the very latest on the many investigations surrounding the former president and his allies. Good evening, one and all. John King, let's start with you. Tonight's races will tell us really a whole lot about the direction of the GOP and possibly the country, with Liz Cheney fighting to keep her seat. Tell us what we're seeing in Wyoming right now.
We get to Wyoming in just one sec, Don, but to the point you just made, maybe all these investigations will ultimately weaken Trump. Maybe. But the salmon color on this map, those are House candidates endorsed by Donald Trump who went on to win their primaries. That's the salmon color of the map. That's a lot of Trump. He still, as of now, as we get late in the primary season, has huge influence. And so we're looking tonight, Liz Cheney, the 10th of the 10th House Republicans who voted for Donald Trump to face a primary. Now, 4 decided not to run for re-election. Only 2 survived their primaries. 4 counties in so far, and Liz Cheney, the incumbent congresswoman, the daughter of the former vice president, the daughter of the former Wyoming Congressman Dick Cheney, at 30% of the vote. 65% if you round that up for Harriet Hageman. She is the Trump-backed challenger. This is Hageman versus Cheney, but it's really Trump versus Cheney in the state of Wyoming, Don. You see the results coming in. Harriet Hageman at 64%. Only 14%. We have to keep counting. But so far, every one of the counties that have reported votes, the salmon color of Donald Trump's candidates in the race. Just to go back in time, why is this so hard for Liz Cheney? Yes, she was popular back home, but this is Donald Trump 2 years ago, 70% of the vote. You come back now to this race now, and votes to count, but as you watch the early results come in, you can understand why Liz Cheney is writing a speech tonight, Don, saying this is a beginning, certainly a next chapter for her, most likely.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Alaska now, because you're keeping tabs on Lisa Murkowski, right? She voted to convict Trump in his second impeachment, John. That race will take time to shake out. What are you watching for?
It will take time to shake out for a couple of reasons. Number one, the polls don't close for a couple more hours. And then number two, Alaska for the first time is using this ranked choice voting. So you vote for your first choice, but you also fill in your second choice, your third choice, and your fourth choice. So it's going to take a while. So we fully expect that Lisa Murkowski will make the November ballot, right? 4 candidates will make the November ballot. These are the top 3 candidates in the state. Kelly Tshibaka is the Republican challenger endorsed by Donald Trump. This is not a traditional Republican primary, so it's not one-on-one, or it's not just the Republicans. The top 4 candidates advance. So what will we learn, Don? It'll take a few days to count all the votes, but we will see. Does Lisa Murkowski come out on top of the 4 candidates who make it to November? Does she come out somewhere in the middle or 4th among those candidates? Everyone expects she will be among the top 4 tonight, and as they count over the next few days, will just give us a sense. Is she stronger than we think? Is she fine for November? Is there some weakness? We'll know that as we count the votes in the next few days.
All right, John, stand by. Let's get to Jessica Snyder. Jessica, let's talk about, Trump is a major factor in what's happening tonight, but there's also some big news in the January 6th investigation as well. His top lawyers, but they were talking about these classified documents, at least. I shouldn't say January 6th because we don't know if they're connected, but the top lawyers having to be interviewed about the documents from Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, and it was actually a really big development today because it means DOJ is talking to some big name witnesses. So this is former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, his deputy Patrick Philbin. Our team learned that they were interviewed by the FBI earlier this year in connection with the ongoing criminal probe into the possible mishandling of classified documents. We saw the search, last Monday. And they both could have answered some really crucial questions about Trump's mindset or his intent if he, in fact, insisted on keeping those classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, because intent will ultimately be crucial for prosecutors to know if they're going to actually charge Trump or maybe top aides around him. So crucially here, Don, Cipollone and Philbin, they were Trump's designated reps to the National Archives when Trump left office. So presumably, they know a lot about maybe the chain of command of those classified documents, possibly why they were taken to Mar-a-Lago. So the fact that they spoke to the FBI earlier this year is a big development in this case, specifically as to this criminal investigation into the classified documents.
And what do we know, Jessica, about the decision by the judge is supposed to make a decision on Thursday on whether he's going to unseal that affidavit?
Right. So they're having a hearing Thursday at 1 p.m. federal court in Florida. So we're still waiting to hear Trump's lawyer's position on whether to make the affidavit public. They actually have a filing due tomorrow morning. The DOJ, though, has made their stance very clear on this. They are adamantly opposed to anything being released from the affidavit. Of course, the details on the affidavit are what allowed the FBI to secure that search warrant. And DOJ has laid it out. They said it could possibly derail their entire investigation if anything is unsealed from the affidavit because it could reveal, specific investigative techniques. They also say it could reveal highly sensitive information about witnesses. So you can expect that DOJ will be arguing forcefully against the unsealing of the affidavit in court on Thursday, especially because, Don, we're seeing that this criminal investigation is still ongoing, still maybe ramping up, especially with the revelation today that they did interview Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin earlier this year.
Caitlin Collins now, President Joe Biden looking ahead to the midterms and trying to give his party a boost there. Just notching a big legislative win today, signing a sweeping $750 billion health care plus a tax and climate bill into law. What did we see there, Caitlin?
Yeah, this is a big deal for the White House. You saw what President Obama referred to it as. It's a lot different than what Democrats were talking about last year when they were debating this Build Back Better proposal. Of course, that was the one that they framed as really this sweeping change to the social safety net. It was going to have all this money and child care, elder care, things of that nature. What President Biden signed in law today is a much more slimmed down version, but it still is a pretty substantial bill, and it still has a lot of the core priorities that Democrats had been pursuing, most notably hundreds of billions of dollars in investments for fighting climate change, energy reform. They also want to work to lower health care costs, and by doing so, extending subsidies from the Affordable Care Act, letting Medicare negotiate drug prices for the first time, and they're paying for all of this by having a corporate minimum tax. And so that is something that the White House has been pitching. It's now framed as the Inflation Reduction Act. Of course, there have been questions put to the White House today, put to Senator Joe Manchin about whether or not it's actually going to change much when it comes to what you're paying for gas, what you're paying for higher prices in the grocery store right now. And Senator Manchin conceded today it is not going to change things immediately. He says he believes the Congressional Budget Office is wrong when they say it's not going to do much to change inflation this year, maybe a little bit next year. He said they've been wrong before, and he does think it will make a difference. But regardless, this is going to see something that you see Democrats and President Biden trying to push out there in front of voters ahead of those November midterm elections, which right now are expected to be fairly tough for Democrats.
Caitlin, if Democrats lose the midterms, Republicans are planning to turn the tables with all of these investigations, right? What is at stake here? There's a lot at stake.
Republicans in the House have promised to be very zealous when it comes to overzealous potentially when it comes to these investigations that they'd like to pursue. They have said that they have several topics they'd like to probe on, including you've seen Democrat or Republicans raising in recent days this search warrant that was executed on former President Trump's home when it comes to those classified documents. They know that there are other avenues they want to pursue: Hunter Biden, President Biden's son, the Afghanistan withdrawal, several other topics as well. And the White House is well aware of that they know that if Republicans do take back the House with a substantive massive majority come November, that there are going to be a series of investigations into every aspect, basically, of the Biden administration. And so, Don, they've been preparing for that. They have brought people on to the White House counsel's office. They have been meeting already in advance, paying close attention to the January 6th investigations and whatnot, because they know that if this does happen in November, as the conventional wisdom stands right now, that that's what it's going to look like. And so that is something that they are bracing for, of course, as they are going to be trying to get out there and boost Democrats ahead of the midterm elections.
Caitlin Collins, Jessica Snyder, John King, the gang is all here. It is a big night. You don't want to miss it, so make sure you all stick around. And we are standing by for what is expected to be a major speech from Liz Cheney tonight in Wyoming as we watch the election results come in. And we've got new developments in the criminal investigation into federal records taken to Mar-a-Lago, why the FBI interviewed two top Trump White House lawyers, the most senior Trump officials interviewed so far. All right, we have a projection to make in the Wyoming congressional race, and that projection is Harriet Hageman has defeated Liz Cheney in Wyoming's GOP House primary. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is in Jackson, Wyoming right now with the very latest. We're going to get to him, and we'll also get to our John King, and Chris Wallace is also going to join us in just a moment. But let's listen to Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, are you there?
And democracy. More important.
Don, I am here. We are watching Liz Cheney on the stage tonight. She has just taken the stage a few moments ago. She'll be delivering a speech tonight that is described to me as a beginning, not an end. The beginning of what her aides say will be the battle for democracy, for the rule of law. Just setting the scene here. Her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney, her mother, Lynn Cheney, have taken their seats. Of course, he was alongside her when she was voting earlier today. But you can see this picturesque scene here just outside Jackson on a cattle ranch. She'll be delivering this speech that she, I'm told, has been writing all day herself. She's been knowing this defeat was coming. She's been preparing for this. But again, the theme of this is to turn the page forward. That's what she'll try and do tonight. But of course, we do have to acknowledge a tough road in this Republican Party. Donald Trump clearly is still in control of the GOP, Don.
Stand by, Jeff. I want to get to Jamie Gangel. Jamie, you know, Liz Cheney has been focused on obviously winning over the last couple of weeks, but also her main focus has been being the co-chair, the vice chair of the January 6th committee. That ultimately hurt her in her own district.
That's true, but as she herself said, she tweeted earlier today, proud to cast my ballot, and the challenges we're facing require serious leaders who will abide by their oath and uphold the Constitution no matter what. And as she's stepping up, I just want to say one thing, Don, before she speaks. I've spoken to Liz Cheney. She is not going anywhere quietly.
Yeah, let's listen in to Liz Cheney.
Wonderful to see so many friends, family, especially wonderful to be here on the beautiful Meade Ranch. And thank you so much, Brad and Kate, for that wonderful introduction. We really are in God's country, and it's wonderful to welcome so many here. I want to say, first of all, a special thanks to every member of Team Cheney who is here in the audience. And to tell you our work is far from over. Among the many, many blessings that we have as Americans and as individuals and as human beings, the blessing of family is surely the most important. And so I want to thank all of my family and pay a special tribute to those who are here with us tonight. My mom and dad, Dick and Lynn Cheney, and my husband, Phil. And 4 of our 5 kids are here. Katie and Gracie and Philip and Richard are all here tonight. And Elizabeth is starting law school today, so we'll have another generation carrying on dedication to the Constitution and to our freedom. A little over a year ago, I received a note from a Gold Star father. He said to me, "Standing up for truth honors all who gave all." And I have thought of his words every single day since then. I've thought of them because they are a reminder of how we must all conduct ourselves. We must conduct ourselves in a way that is worthy of the men and women who wear the uniform of this nation, and in particular of those who have given the ultimate sacrifice. This is not a game. Every one of us must be committed to the eternal defense of this miraculous experiment called America. And at the heart of our democratic process are elections. They are the foundational principle of our Constitution. 2 years ago, I won this primary with 73% of the vote. I could easily have done the same again. The path was clear. But it would have required that I go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election. It would have required that I enable his ongoing efforts to unravel our democratic system and attack the foundations of our republic. That was a path I could not and would not take. No House seat, no office in this land is more important than the principles that we are all sworn to protect. And I well understood the potential political consequences of abiding by my duty. Our republic relies upon the goodwill of all candidates for office to accept honorably the outcome of elections. And tonight, Harriet Hageman has received the most votes in this primary. She won. I called her to concede the race. This primary election is over, but now the real work begins. The great and original champion of our party, Abraham Lincoln, was defeated in elections for the Senate and the House before he won the most important election of all. Lincoln ultimately prevailed, he saved our Union, and he defined our obligation as Americans for all of history. Speaking at Gettysburg of the great task remaining before us, Lincoln said that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. As we meet here tonight, that remains our greatest and most important task. Most of world history is a story of violent conflict, of servitude and suffering. Most people in most places have not lived in freedom. Our American freedom is a providential departure from history. We are the exception. We have been given the gift of freedom by God and our founding fathers. It has been said that the long arc of history bends toward justice and freedom. That's true, but only if we make it bend. Today, our highest duty is to bend the arc of history to preserve our nation and its blessings, to ensure that freedom will not perish, to protect the very foundations of this constitutional republic. Never in our nation's 246 years have we seen what we saw on January 6th. Like so many Americans, I assumed that the violence and the chaos of that day would have prompted a united response, a recognition that this was a line that must never be crossed, a tragic chapter in our nation's history to be studied by historians to ensure that it can never happen again. But instead, major elements of my party still vehemently defend those who caused it. At the heart of the attack on January 6th is a willingness to embrace dangerous conspiracies that attack the very core premise of our nation, that lawful elections, reviewed by the courts when necessary and certified by the states and Electoral College, determine who serves as president. If we do not condemn the conspiracies and the lies, if we do not hold those responsible to account, we will be excusing this conduct, and it will become a feature of all elections. America will never be the same. Today, as we meet here, there are Republican candidates for governor who deny the outcome of the 2020 election and who may refuse to certify future elections if they oppose the results. We have candidates for Secretary of State who may refuse to report the actual results of the popular vote in future elections. And we have candidates for Congress, including here in Wyoming, who refuse to acknowledge that Joe Biden won the 2020 election and suggest that states decertify their results. Our nation is barreling once again towards crisis, lawlessness, and violence. No American should support election deniers for any position of genuine responsibility where their refusal to follow the rule of law will corrupt our future. Our nation is young in the history of mankind, and yet we're the oldest democracy in the world. Our survival is not guaranteed. History has shown us over and over again how poisonous lies destroy free nations. Over the last several months, in the January 6th hearings, the American people have watched dozens of Republicans, including the most senior officials working for President Trump in the White House, the Justice Department, and on his campaign, people who served President Trump loyally, testify that they all told him the election was not stolen or rigged and there was no massive fraud. That's why President Trump and others invent excuses, pretexts for people not to watch the hearings at all. But no citizen of this republic is a bystander. All of us have an obligation to understand what actually happened. We cannot abandon the truth and remain a free nation. To believe Donald Trump's election lies, you must believe that dozens of federal and state courts who ruled against him, including many judges he appointed, were all corrupted and biased, that all manner of crazy conspiracy theories stole our election from us, and that Donald Trump actually remains president today. As of last week, you must also believe that 30 career FBI agents who have spent their lives working to serve our country abandoned their honor and their oaths and went to Mar-a-Lago not to perform a lawful search or address a national security threat, but instead with a secret plan to plant fake incriminating documents in the boxes they seized. This is yet another insidious lie. Donald Trump knows that voicing these conspiracies will provoke violence and threats of violence. This happened on January 6th, and it's now happening again. It is entirely foreseeable that the violence will escalate further. Yet he and others continue, purposely, to feed the danger. Today, our federal law enforcement is being threatened. A federal judge is being threatened. Fresh threats of violence are arising everywhere. And despite knowing all of this, Donald Trump recently released the names of the FBI agents involved in the search. That was purposeful and malicious. No patriotic American should excuse these threats or be intimidated by them. Our great nation must not be ruled by a mob provoked over social media. Our duty as citizens of this republic is not only to defend the freedom that's been handed down to us. We also have an obligation to learn from the actions of those who came before, to know the stories of grit and perseverance of the brave men and women who built and saved this union. In the lives of these great Americans, we find inspiration and purpose. In May of 1864, after years of war and a string of reluctant Union generals, Ulysses S. Grant met General Lee's forces at the Battle of the Wilderness. In 2 days of heavy fighting, the Union suffered over 17,000 casualties. At the end of that battle, General Grant faced a choice. Most assumed he would do what previous Union generals had done and retreat. On the evening of May 7th, Grant began to move. As the fires of the battle still smoldered, Grant rode to the head of the column. He rode to the intersection of Brock Road and Orange Plank Road. And there, as the men of his army watched and waited, instead of turning north back towards Washington and safety, Grant turned his horse south toward Richmond, and the heart of Lee's army. Refusing to retreat, he pressed on to victory. Lincoln and Grant and all who fought in our nation's tragic Civil War, including my own great-great-grandfathers, saved our Union. Their courage saved freedom. And if we listen closely, they are speaking to us down the generations. We must not idly squander what so many have fought and died for. America has meant so much to so many because we are the best hope of freedom on earth. Last week in Laramie, a gentleman came up to me with tears in his eyes. "I'm not an American," he said, "but my children are. I grew up in Brazil. I know how fragile freedom is, and we must not lose it here." A few days ago, here in Jackson, a woman told me that her grandparents had survived Auschwitz. They found refuge in America. She said she was afraid that she had nowhere to go if freedom died here. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom must not, cannot, and will not die here. We must be very clear-eyed about the threat we face and about what is required to defeat it. I have said since January 6th that I will do whatever it takes to ensure Donald Trump is never again anywhere near the Oval Office, and I mean it. This is a fight for all of us together. I'm a conservative Republican. I believe deeply in the principles and the ideals on which my party was founded. I love its history, and I love what our party has stood for. But I love my country more. So I ask you tonight to join me. As we leave here, let us resolve that we will stand together, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, against those who would destroy our republic. They are angry and they are determined, but they have not seen anything like the power of Americans united in defense of our Constitution and committed to the cause of freedom. There is no greater power on this earth, and with God's help, we will prevail. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless Wyoming. God bless the United States of America. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Liz Cheney in Jackson, Wyoming, conceding to Harriet Hageman in her primary loss there. Called very early and giving a really, I would call it a barn burner of a speech, chastising members of her party, saying that she will do everything in her power not to allow Donald Trump anywhere near the Oval Office again, and getting applause from those in the crowd. Obviously, it was a crowd of supporters there in Jackson, Wyoming. I want to bring in now CNN Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash, CNN Senior Political Analyst Nia Malika Henderson, Chris Wallace, and also Chris is a host of CNN's Who's Talking to Chris Wallace, and CNN Political Director David Chalian, CNN Special Correspondent Jamie Gangel, also here with me. A lot of folks, because it is a big night, right? And there's lots going on. First, though, to Jamie Gangel. Jamie, we were speaking, and as you were giving your answer, Liz Cheney got up to give her speech tonight. But what did you think of it? I mean, she did not hold back.
She did not, and I don't think we, should be surprised. I thought that one of the most powerful things she said, Dom, was when she said that she talked about that 2 years ago she won with 73% of the vote, and she said that she could have done that again, and then she said, quote, "But it would have required that I go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election. It would have required that I enable his ongoing efforts to unravel our democratic system and attack the foundations of our republic." Look, Don, Liz Cheney has made it clear since she voted to impeach Donald Trump, and with her work as vice chair of the January 6th committee, that she sees Donald Trump as a clear and present danger, that she believes democracy is in peril. And she has known for quite some time that she was likely to lose tonight, but that fighting for that democracy was more important than keeping her seat in Congress, Don.
She said no House seat or office is that important.
Right.
She also
Correct.
said that she called Harriet Hageman and she congratulated her on the win. And she said now the real work begins. You know, Dana, let me bring in Dana Basher. Dana, are you surprised that she went so hard on this speech?
No, I'm not. Well, there's one bit I was surprised about, which I'll tell you in a second. But I just wanted to say
Mar-a-Lago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think we were both go, oh, okay, well, she's going to go there too. But before we get to that, what was so, I mean, how many concession speeches have we listened to over the years from politicians? Yeah. This was a concession speech, but it was an opening gambit campaign speech all in one. She's not running for anything in particular yet, maybe not ever. I mean, she might run for president in the Republican primary process, but even if she doesn't, this campaign that she is launching is not about one for office necessarily. It's a campaign very explicitly, very intentionally to defeat Donald Trump, Trumpism, and everything about it, because she says it is such it will make the republic crumble. On Mar-a-Lago, we've heard her talk about January 6th, obviously, so many times, and the whole thrust of her criticism of Donald Trump has been in and around stealing the election. This is different. This is a new avenue of criticism that she didn't have to go there at all. She's got enough from January 6th, and she did.
She did not. But when she brought up Lincoln, she said Lincoln was defeated in the House and the Senate before and then went on to win the ultimate seat in the land. I certainly thought, you know, she's saying maybe, you know, there's a chance.
Or maybe she's going to be a general because she talked about Grant, too.
Yeah.
So.
Were you surprised by her speech? Anything in her speech, Chris? We were frantically taking notes here, and I just stopped because there was so much she was saying. I mean, she really went in.
What struck me was the reference to Lincoln and the reference to Grant and the comparison to the Civil War. And I think she was very explicitly saying that just as our Union was in jeopardy, life or death jeopardy back in the 1860s, that the Union is in jeopardy today. And that's a pretty stark way. She said that we talked about a civil war that saved our Union, and that is the threat that we face today, that what we're facing now is just as serious as what went on in the Great Civil War. And obviously, at the end, she didn't talk about a specific role, but she called on Americans to join her and stand together against those who would destroy our country. And look, I suspect she's not being coy. I don't think she knows what form that's going to take, whether it's going to be a presidential campaign or some kind of a citizens movement, like an anti-war movement, in this case, an anti-Trump movement. The other thing I would say is in this Civil War, she declared war on Donald Trump and Donald Trump's Republican Party, and she specifically called on Americans not to vote for the dozens of election deniers who have won Republican nominations for the governorship or the Secretary of State roles in various states, which would have a dramatic role in 2024 in whether or not elections are certified or not.
I think I think the Civil War motif, Don, is sort of why she brought up Mar-a-Lago. I think she wanted to tie, it sounded like in the speech, Donald Trump releasing the names of FBI agents and then the violence or the threats warning that has been put out since the Mar-a-Lago search and seizure of his property. I think she wanted to tie in the real violence we've seen and the threats of violence that we have heard about from the government to this whole notion of this brewing potential civil war. I do think, though, she was a truth teller tonight. Like, that's the other thing that Liz Cheney has on her side. She has the truth. She has the truth about the 2020 election. So when she cites these Republican nominees who have won their primaries who deny the truth about the 2020 election, she has that on her side. And I think she leaned into sort of being a truth teller tonight. And you said she congratulated Harriet Hageman. I didn't, maybe I missed it.
She just said, I called her.
I didn't hear a congratulations, actually. What I heard was, I called her.
I called her.
She won.
She won, right.
I called her to concede the primary is over. There was no congratulations. And in fact, later, after she went through the litany of gubernatorial candidates or whatever, she also noted quite clearly there were some Republicans in the state of Wyoming, she was referring to Harriet Hageman, who are bought into the election lie that Donald Trump tells about the 2020 election as well, and how dangerous that is. And then the final thing I would just add is she also, I thought, sort of, it was a call to arms of citizenship. This whole notion of that no American citizen can be a bystander to this right now, that every American citizen is needed to help bend that arc towards justice in this moment. I thought, you know, that's part of her appeal that is crossing party lines right now.
You're right about that. Reflexively, we're so used to saying, call the opponent and congratulate them. And I noted she did not congratulate her. She just said, I called her tonight. She did win, saying, we need to accept the results of elections, and I need to.
Right,
I need
that's
to
not
say that
nothing in the Republican Party.
Right.
That's not nothing given what Trump has done, given what Harriet Hageman has done as well in denying the results of a free and fair election. Liz Cheney is telling Americans that our democracy is fragile, right? I mean, if you think about American democracy, it's really only about 60 years old, right? Where everyone could actually vote. So he is calling on Americans saying, listen, this is a 5-alarm fire. Are you going to gather and put this fire out that is being set by Donald Trump, that is being fueled by his allies? And listen, she is lonely in her party, and in some ways, she's sort of lonely in the American sort of political space. There aren't a lot of people who are sounding this alarm in the way that she is doing, at great risk. Obviously, we saw what happened tonight. She lost because she has been willing to confront Donald Trump over and over again. She will continue to do it. Will she gain any traction within her own party beyond what she has now? And will she kind of wake Americans up to what she sees as a real crisis for the country?
History has shown us how poisonous lies have ruined nations. Trump and his allies, she said, invented pretexts to get people not to watch the hearings and to believe his lies. And you'd have to believe Donald Trump's lies and all the judges and all the courts and everyone, that they're all biased if you believe the election lies or if you believe what Trump and his allies are selling, Chris.
You know, what struck me was this was a woman totally at peace with herself and with the decisions that she made. And it was pointed out. She said, I won 70% 2 years ago in the primary. I could have done it again. This is she's given up a lot. And in a world where we see a lot of politicians who shade things or flatly deny things that they privately believe because for their own personal gain, she has gone in a very different direction and thrown away a very promising career in the Republican Party because of her strong feelings about Donald Trump. And there wasn't an ounce, not a scintilla of doubt or hesitation about it. I chose to go down this path. I understood what this was going to cost me, and full speed ahead.
What you have to understand about Liz Cheney, and especially, there are a lot of Democrats and a lot of liberals who are, loving Liz Cheney right now. But Liz Cheney said, I am a conservative Republican.
Very conservative.
I love the Republican Party, but I love my country more than I love any party. And what they have to understand in this moment, she's right. We all have to stand up for our democracy, including journalists, including everyone. We have to tell the truth. And we have to stand up to the lies of the former president who are going to attack Liz Cheney and journalists and American citizens who, who don't believe in his lies. That is the truth. She is a truth teller.
Yeah, and so much of this is blurred. So much of the reporting from Jeff Zeleny and others out in Wyoming talking to voters saying, well, she's too far to the left. She's too far to the left.
She's not left.
It's not left. It's not about the traditional lines, party lines, left and right, are not relevant here. They're totally not relevant here. They are relevant when we're talking about the kind of legislation that just passed in Congress, or about basic, should we have low taxes or bigger government? Those are conversations and really important policy debates that still go on. That's not what this is about. This is about whether or not, in her words, freedom will die here. Make sure that freedom will not die here. She fundamentally believes, and she says it over and over, that if Donald Trump and Trumpism is not stopped, that's what will happen.
I want to talk to you when we come back. I want to talk to you guys about what the Cheney family and the Cheney name means in Wyoming. I heard reports of people who were casting their vote for Harriet Hageman were actually sad. One man cried on camera because he cast his vote against Liz Cheney, and it was the first time that he had cast his vote against a Cheney, probably in his history as an adult voter. But stick around, everyone. Liz Cheney loses in Wyoming, the GOP primary there. The Trump-backed Harriet Hageman, and drops a barn burner of a speech saying, now the real work begins. We'll be right back. Liz Cheney losing the Wyoming GOP primary tonight, but declaring our work is far from over. Those are her words. Back with Dana Bashni, Malika Henderson, Chris Wallace, David Chalian, and Jamie Gangel. Jamie, what is her next move? I mean, we talked about, she talked about Grant. She talked about Lincoln. That's the part where I said, well, maybe she's hinting at something, especially when she said Lincoln was defeated in the House and the Senate before winning the ultimate seat in the land. But maybe I'm reading too much in that.
I don't think you are, Don. Look, she did not announce that she's running for the White House tonight, but she certainly left the door open, and what you just quoted there says that. I think that Liz Cheney has made a decision that, as she said, she's going to do whatever it takes to keep Donald Trump from ever being president again. So what does that look like? Does she run as a Republican? Is there a base for a Liz Cheney Republican in primaries today? Does she run as an independent? I think these are all decisions that, as David Chalian said, they come down the road. But is the door open? Absolutely. I just want to mention one other thing. There's a line in her speech where she said that after January 6th, she said, like so many Americans, I assumed that the violence and the chaos of that day would have prompted a united response, a recognition this was a line that might never be crossed. I've spoken to her over this period of time, and I remember at the beginning, after the impeachment of Donald Trump, when she started to run for office, she really believed that she could almost go person to person, voter to voter in Wyoming, and convince them that this was about the rule of law, about democracy, about the Constitution, about saving the country. She very quickly realized that Wyoming was Donald Trump country, and that no matter what she did, there were minds that wouldn't be changed. So I think she has known for a long time that this night was coming, and she has been thinking about the next step for many months now.
David Chalian, if she does decide to run in 2024, I mean, where does she? You heard Hillary Rosen last night on CNN, Democratic strategist, saying Hillary Rosen saying that Liz Cheney will find herself an alien in. There's not a party that will accept her.
Right.
A Democratic or Republican party.
Right. When Jamie just said that Liz Cheney learned quickly that Wyoming is Trump country, another way to say that is Liz Cheney's learned quickly that the Republican Party is Trump country.
Right.
I mean, that is the reality of what we see here. And by the way, notice what Harriet Hageman said tonight in her victory speech, and what the RNC, the Republican National Committee, put out in their statement. The way that they're painting this is what happens when you don't pay attention to what your constituents want you to focus on. So they're trying to just paint Liz Cheney as this aberration who chose to not focus on the things that are most important to her constituents, that she got out of step with her constituents. I think that very same notion is what poses a problematic path to her in a presidential nominating race. I mean, I think that the Republican primary electorate that exists right now, everything we know about it, would suggest that there's not a ton of market share there for Liz Cheney to actually be able to have a path to the nomination, given her current mission to be everything anti-Donald Trump.
We know the importance of January 6th, but is there some truth to what the Republican National Committee is saying, and Harriet Hageman, that she basically made herself irrelevant to the voters of Wyoming? I was talking about a report that I heard on NPR. This older gentleman started crying and saying, this is the first time I voted against Cheney, because she's not useful to the voters of Wyoming. And he was sad about it. He voted for Harriet Hageman, but he voted for her, grudgingly. He didn't want to do it.
Yeah, Jeff Zeleny in his reports throughout the last week have included a lot of voters that have said she just started focusing exclusively on the January 6th issue, and that is not my that's not on the top of my priority list.
Yeah. How much damage can she do to Trump at this point? I mean, she won't be in office anymore. Which, I mean,
well, she's going to have a big platform until Election Day, because she's still going to be the vice chair and really the leading voice of the January 6th committee, and we know they're going to have hearings again in the fall, so she can continue to play a role. But out of office, I was just thinking about this. What's the platform? Sure, she can campaign against Trump, but Lord knows there are plenty of other people who are campaigning against Trump. Someone mentioned the idea of her running as an independent. That would be disastrous. She runs as an independent. She only helps Trump because there's a Democrat who's getting people who don't like Trump, and she's getting people who don't like Trump. Guess what? That helps Trump. If she runs in the Republican primaries, that only makes it a more fractionated field. And if you've got the more candidates you have getting little slices of the pie, leaves the fairly big slice that Donald Trump would have as a winning plurality.
She's a woman on an island right now.
She is. I mean, I think overall this was a very good night for Donald Trump, a very good night for Trumpism. He is sending a message to anyone who is in office that if you cross me, your career in politics in the Republican Party is over. I think he's like 8-2 in terms of the people who voted to impeach him. 8 either retired or lost. 2 have won, and we'll see if they go on to win in November. So he is doing quite well. This is what he wanted to do. He wanted to exact his revenge against folks like Liz Cheney. He was able to do that. She obviously is taking her own pound of flesh as well with the January 6th committee. But this was a good night for Donald Trump and all of his allies.
What does this race say about the Republican Party, Dana?
Well, I mean, it says what Nia just said, which is that the Republican Party, I mean, not that we didn't know this before, but this is one more data point, a big data point, when you see that a Cheney lost so big in Wyoming, and it is Trump's party. I mean, that's just what it says, and it said it for a long time. But I do think when we're looking at like what's next and where does she take this from here, I think that we need to think about the term campaign in a non-traditional way, because we think about campaign as I'm running for office, or I want this to happen. I want this for myself. And I'm not saying that she's not, she is a politician and she wants to have a say in public discourse, but she also is a very famous person who will use her megaphone and her platform to keep saying the kind of thing that she said, and she will get attention. She will get a lot of attention.
So we'll see. And there isn't a network who will turn her down if if she offers or she wants to come on. So she'll be able to discuss all of it. Thank you all. What a night. I mean, we were planning another show. We didn't think that this would be projected for a while, but who knows?
Quick to feed.
Quick to feed. Thank you all. It is election night in America, and we're going to go to John King at the Magic Wall. That is next.
Billy Joel exclusive. Extraordinary with Fareed Zakaria. Saturday at 9.
All right, this is the big news tonight. CNN projects that vocal critic, Trump critic Liz Cheney has lost Wyoming's GOP primary. We'll get straight to CNN's Jeff Zeleny is in Wyoming for us. Also, John King at the Magic Wall. Let's get to John first, as a matter of fact. John, Liz Cheney losing her primary tonight. What are the numbers showing?
They're showing, Don, you look at the numbers right here, not quite 2-1, but Harriet Hageman, the Trump-backed challenger to Liz Cheney, is winning and winning convincingly, 24,511 votes. A lead right now, or at about 57% of the reporting. You see 62-33 or 62-34 if you want to round that up for Liz Cheney. And you see on the map here, mostly filling in with Harriet Hageman's color, the salmon color, which is what we give to Trump-endorsed candidates. So I want to make one key point, Don. Education is increasingly the biggest dividing line in American politics. In the 2 counties where Liz Cheney is leading, Albany County down here, it's the highest percentage of college graduates in the state of Wyoming right here in this county. The second highest percentage of college graduates in the state of Wyoming right here, Teton County, the other county where Liz Cheney is winning. Now, we know in Teton County there was a concerted effort to get Democrats and independents to register as Republicans for this primary. You can do that in advance. You could also do it today on primary day. Many of them might switch back. But you see an effort there in these two counties. Higher education, college-educated voters tend to have a lesser view of Donald Trump, if you will. But so maybe modest success for Liz Cheney in those two counties, but overwhelmingly, Harriet Hageman most likely will win easily in November. She will be the next Congresswoman, and Liz Cheney moves on to, as she discussed tonight, the next chapter.
And these are the counties that Joe Biden won.
Yes, they are. If you go back in time to look at 2020, they're also the two counties Joe Biden won. So they're the least conservative in a very conservative state, if you want to put it that way. Again, they tend to be higher educated. They're the number one and number two in terms of percentage of residents, voters who have college degrees. And number three, Don, there was an effort by Democrats and independents, organized efforts, people in different groups, to say, switch your registration, vote for Liz Cheney, take a principled stand. Clearly, if you come back to the 2022 numbers now and look at it, it wasn't enough. So it might be a small, minor moral victory within the bigger loss for Liz Cheney, but she's losing, and losing quite convincingly.
Jeff Zeleny, Cheney tonight saying, quote, our work is far from over. Tell us more about what we heard.
Well, look, we did hear about the next chapter ahead. She talked just briefly about her election tonight, and she said she called her opponent, Harriet Hageman, and she said she did indeed win, but used that as a metaphor about the importance of free and fair elections, and used that really not to talk anything about the race or why she lost, but about what the next chapters are. And Don, I'm going to turn around behind me. You can see Congresswoman Cheney is shaking the final hands here. She's been talking to every single supporter who turned out to this ranch outside of Jackson, who are here as she called for Republicans and independents and Democrats to join together to support and defend democracy. This speech I thought was interesting in the sense that it was so infused with history. She is a student of history. She's a historian. Her mother and father are as well, and she talked about the fragility of this democracy and talked quite squarely about Donald Trump. Perhaps one of the most pointed moments in the speech, she said she reminded people that she won by 73% of the vote, the primary, just 2 years ago. She said she could have done that again had she gone down the path of election denialism. She said that's not a path that she would ever be comfortable going down. So I think when I've been talking to supporters here in the crowd, they are wondering what her next step is going to be. They are wondering if she will directly challenge Donald Trump should he run for president. She did not give any more than a hint to that, but they do know that she will stay involved. One thing I can also say, she is now going to be turning her work back to the January 6th committee. Those hearings are going to be starting in September. She has a little bit of time to figure out the next steps, but I'm told she will be setting up likely a super PAC to support other Republican candidates, and will be setting up some other vehicles where she can challenge the former president. And again, as you can see, she is taking pictures with staff members, a lot of hugging of families. What this is really the end of the Cheney legacy here, the arc of her father being a congressman. He was here for the speech tonight, and she, of course, will be leaving after 3 terms in the U.S. House. Certainly not how she wanted to leave, but in some respects on her own terms, looking forward.
She's
Don?
so close there, Jeff. I mean, if you could just get her to come over to a microphone, we'd gladly take her live here on CNN.
We've asked and we've tried, but we sure would. I've certainly given her that opportunity to talk to you, Don, but as you can see now, she is actually, I'll turn to this side, she's posing for a group photo with Team Cheney members, and many of them have shirts that say fearless. That is one word you heard over and over again, the word fearless. We're just, at a nightfall here on the beautiful Wyoming prairie, a lot of mosquitoes and bugs in the air, but these are the group of people who are going to carry her to her next chapter, should she have one, whatever that is, Don.
All right, wear your bug spray, don't get bitten. But we'll take her if she does come over. Thank you, John. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it.
I'll let you know.
I'm going to bring in CNN senior political analyst David Gergen, who was an advisor to presidents, I should say, Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Clinton. Also, Bill Kristol is here, the director of Defending Democracy Together. He's also the editor-at-large at The Bulwark. So happy to have both of you on, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Bill, I want you to listen to some of what Liz Cheney said tonight, and then we'll talk. Here it is.
2 years ago, I won this primary with 73% of the vote. I could easily have done the same again. The path was clear. But it would have required that I go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election. It would have required that I enable his ongoing efforts to unravel our democratic system and attack the foundations of our republic. That was a path I could not and would not take.
Bill, she knows why she lost, but this is now her mission.
Yeah, it is. And let me say, Don, if Jeff can get Liz to come on, I'll yield my time. You can bump me and David and let Liz speak with you, because she has a lot to say, I think. I mean, she almost understated the case, don't you think, Don? I mean, it wasn't just that she sort of wouldn't go along with Trump. She decided she had to play a key role. She accepted the appointment to the committee. She accepted playing a key role on the committee, the key role on the committee. I mean, bringing the truth to light about January 6th, and above all, exposing Trump's lies and exposing this man who is unfit for the presidency, as she thinks, and trying to put the party on the spot and to come to grips with the fact that he's unfit for the presidency. That's been her mission for the last year and a half. It's her mission going forward. So it was a choice she made. She knew it would risk her reelection, and she took the choice. She made the choice, and I think she made it without any second guessing of herself, or really even any regrets. I think when she says she thinks what she's been doing on the committee is more important than winning the House seat, and when she implies that going forward this is a setback, but that the struggle continues, I think she very much believes that.
Another moment from Cheney. Let's listen.
Donald Trump knows that voicing these conspiracies will provoke violence and threats of violence. This happened on January 6th, and it's now happening again. It is entirely foreseeable that the violence will escalate further. Yet he and others continue, purposely, to feed the danger. Today, our federal law enforcement is being threatened. A federal judge is being threatened. Fresh threats of violence are arising everywhere. And despite knowing all of this, Donald Trump recently released the names of the FBI agents involved in the search. That was purposeful and malicious. No patriotic American should excuse these threats or be intimidated by them. Our great nation must not be ruled by a mob provoked over social media.
So, David, the question is, I mean, it's a stark warning, right? She's actually right about that and what should happen. But is the GOP deaf to her message?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, Don, but I think tonight should be a night of celebration by principled conservatives like Bill Kristol. At long last, we have someone who is, can speak to the country, command a national microphone, and also take the case to the country for moderate mainstream conservatives to take the future away from Donald Trump and the minions around him. So I think in that sense, she's paid a price, as have many others who voted to impeach Trump. I think now, Don, if I'm not mistaken, Bill can correct me, I think there were 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump along the way, and 8 now, I think we're up to 8, will not be back in the next Congress. Several of them retired, didn't have to put up with this. Others just got beaten in the primaries like Liz Cheney. That's a remarkable number, but I think it was for a terrific cause.
Yeah, and you're right about the numbers, but listen, the former president obviously gloating about her defeat tonight. Bill, you said Cheney's recent voting has been more for what she believes and less about what Wyoming voters want, like gun control, for example. Listen to what tonight's winner, Harriet Hageman, had to say about that.
Wyoming has spoken on behalf of everyone who is concerned that the game is becoming more and more rigged against them. And what Wyoming has shown today is that while it may not be easy, we can dislodge entrenched politicians who believe they've risen above the people they are supposed to represent and serve.
So, Bill, Hageman making the point that they're getting rid of, quote, unquote, elites who don't represent Wyoming voters. Her message resonated?
Yeah, apparently. I mean, I think it's it's Trump's message, though, let's be honest. And she's an instrument for delivering a message of loyalty to Donald Trump. It's not as if Hageman made a big deal of whatever minor differences she has with Liz Cheney on public policy or criticized Liz Cheney for, substantive reasons. It was the disloyalty to Trump, and even more than not going along with Trump, as I said, taking him on frontally and challenging him and challenging the big lie. And Hageman not only refuses to, challenge the big lie, she embraced the big lie. And so that's where we are. I mean, Wyoming's elected a lot of good people, honestly, over the years. And to see this party go 2-1 for a candidate whose entire reason for running. Why did you challenge Liz Cheney? She chaired Liz Cheney's campaign, didn't she, in 2016 or maybe it was even 2018? The entire reason for running was that Liz Cheney was taking on Trump's big lie, and Harriet Hageman was embracing it, and Hageman won 2-1.
But Harriet Hageman, wasn't she a very vocal Trump critic who turned Trump supporter, and and now here she is?
Yeah, I think in 2016 when we were doing some last-ditch never Trump stuff, right before the Republican convention, I may have even spoken with her. I can't remember; it was such a blur. But there were a whole bunch of people scattered around the country trying to think of ways to detour Trump from the Republican nomination. And in a way, it's a very good, I don't know what's the term for this, a symbol of where the party is, that she's defeating Liz Cheney, who's told the truth by embracing Trump's lies.
And David, Liz Cheney worked in government and within the GOP long before she ran for office. She was by her father's side when he was VP. She worked in the State Department on multiple Republican campaigns. She even hosted shows on Fox. But is there a future for her, for her fight in the current Republican Party?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, I think there's going to be a huge market for her to write memoir, what happened. I think she's going to be in demand to go around the country and speak. I think financially she'll be extremely well off in that sense. And I think, the press is going to give her an opening to say her piece, because she does represent this voice that has become so important, and it's representative of a much larger voice. And Don, she's very, very unlikely she'd be the nominee of the party, extremely unlikely. But she can cause a lot of leakage from the Trump ship. Her effort, if she runs to the left of Trump in some early primaries, and you find someone like DeSantis, governor of Florida, running from the right of Trump, that could cause serious problems for him. So Liz Cheney is a formidable political force unto herself, at least, and will be for the next short while. We don't know how long it will last, how long she can command that platform. But for the moment, she's going to be very sought after.
Yeah. Bill, let's talk about, because we're talking about Wyoming, but there's also Alaska. And, these are really, we're talking about some marquee names tonight: Cheney, Palin, Trump. I mean, you can trace the evolution of the GOP throughout the last few decades through these people and what they stand for.
Yeah, it's funny, two small states, Wyoming and Alaska, but two important in their own right and symbolically important primaries, maybe three, because in Alaska you have both Murkowski. It won't be resolved tonight that she'll move on to the final ballot in November, and Palin in this congressional special election, but also the primary, I guess, for the November election for the House seat in Alaska. So two states that have one House seat, two small states, with, as you say, kind of symbolic races. Alaska, we won't know the results for a while. Murkowski will certainly move on to the finals in November. But it is famous names and families that are well established in those states. But I think just one point on what David was saying. Liz Cheney is very unlikely to be the Republican nominee next time, and it'd be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I think she may well try to run. She may well run, but will the Republican Party let her run? I mean, what if Ron McDaniel, the Republican chairman, says you have to pledge to support the Republican nominee, whoever he or she is, to be on the ballot or to be on the debate stage? I don't know. That would probably get majority support at this point in the Republican National Committee. Liz Cheney will not do that. She wouldn't support Donald Trump in 2024. Will they try to just keep her off the ballot? Would she then say, well, this is really illegitimate. This is not consistent with American principles and practice. I may have to run as an independent, or maybe I would even swallow hard and support a Democrat. I think it's a very fluid moment. I think David's right. Liz Cheney is has a status that's so unusual for a House member, right? I mean, apart from the speakers, apart from Gingrich, Pelosi, people like that, she must be the most prominent, the most central backbench member of the House of Representatives in our memory, in our lifetime, don't you think? And so she really does, what she decides to do and how it all plays out, I think she's a central figure, I would put it that way, in American politics for the next couple of years at least.
Bill, David, thank you very much. I appreciate it. In the middle of the primaries tonight, we've also got new revelations from the investigation swirling around the former president and his allies. But has a legal cloud hanging over him actually tightened his stranglehold on the GOP? We'll discuss. All right, it's election night, but we also have some other news to report. The FBI interviewed 2 key Trump White House insiders as part of the investigation into those classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Former Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone and his deputy Patrick Philbin, both speaking to investigators earlier this year. And on Thursday, the federal judge who approved the Mar-a-Lago search warrant will hold a hearing on whether to unseal the affidavit, the document that lays out what information investigators used to justify the search. Joining me now to discuss, CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Ellie Honig, as well as CNN contributor and former Nixon White House counsel John Dean, and CNN legal analyst and former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jennifer Rogers. All very accomplished minds. Thank you, and people. I appreciate you joining us. Good evening to all of you. John, what would Pat Cipollone and Philbin know about these Mar-a-Lago documents as White House lawyers? What would they know?
Well, they initially were the contact points for the archives and making some of the decisions about what should and should not go. They later got removed from that post as I think the things of January 6 unraveled, and they were all hands on deck there. But they know apparently a lot, and according to the reporting, they were able to tell the archives that no, Trump didn't want to cooperate. No, he believed these documents were his. And apparently Philbin tried to help facilitate getting that information to actually go to the archives. So they know a little bit. They don't know all the details. I don't think they were involved in packing and shipping, but they certainly have the big picture.
What would the FBI be asking them?
Well, they'd want to know what was the process to sort out what was classified or not. How did documents get in the shipment that was going to, and why was it going to Mar-a-Lago? That they were supposed to be packing up stuff to go to the archives, and this was going the wrong direction. So I'm sure they had many questions.
Yeah, Ellie, listen, I hate to ask this question, but I will, because the former president and his attorneys or representatives have been saying, well, he had this standing order about declassifying everything that he sent to Mar-a-Lago. Will they ask about that? Because that just seems ludicrous. That's not even part of a declassifying process, what they're alleging. But.
Yeah, logically, I think you'd want to ask anyone who was in or around the White House. And there's really sort of 2 issues here when it comes to this declassification defense. First, did the president have legal authority to declassify? The short answer to that is yes, he has either extremely broad or unlimited authority to declassify. But separate from that is the factual question of did he? Did he exercise that authority? And thus far, not only is there no evidence he did, there's counter evidence. John Bolton, for example, was on New Day this morning and said he never heard of any such thing. So I think you would want to ask everybody who was in and around the White House, did you ever hear of such a declassification order? So far, we've seen no evidence that there was.
But, I mean, why would they even ask? Because it's so silly.
Because you have to disprove. You want to anticipate and disprove. It is silly, but
then,
yeah.
I had a professor on, a scholar on this last night, and he said there's a process with this. You have to notify different agencies. Everyone involved has to know. Just because you said something is declassified, you don't let other people know that it's declassified, that doesn't automatically make it declassified.
Yeah,
it's not.
typically.
It's the dumbest argument. Well, excuse, because it just doesn't hold water.
Typically, you would have that kind of process and evidence. But I think you do want to anticipate and disprove that as a prosecutor.
Maggie Haberman is reporting over at the New York Times that Trump basically felt that the documents were his. Is that a thing?
No, they're not his. They're ours. They were all of ours. Yeah. And I will say, the fact that if he did say those are mine shows at least that he knew they were there, right? And then presumably knew that they were taken down to Mar-a-Lago. That's a piece of the puzzle you'd have to prove as well.
Yeah. Jennifer, we know that in June, the DOJ subpoenaed and obtained surveillance footage from Mar-a-Lago. The Times is reporting that they were alarmed by what they saw. So if they're so alarmed by what they saw, what do you think they could have seen?
Well, they could have seen boxes being removed out of the room where they were supposed to be secured. They could have seen people carrying boxes they knew to contain classified information who are not cleared to have that kind of documentary evidence. They could have seen, we were talking about the lawyers who apparently certified that no classified information was present. One way that you could determine whether or not those statements are false or true is by looking at surveillance footage to see, whether things are moved around after such statements are made or whether they're not. And then if they find classified information in a certain room, you know that it was there the whole time. So, I think that they're very interested in that for a variety of reasons. And another one is to gain witnesses, right? Who's going in and out of there? Those are the people that you want to speak to if you're FBI investigators on this case. So they should be contacting those folks and putting them in the grand jury.
Ella, you know what the DOJ is arguing. They're arguing against releasing this affidavit information. Do you think that saying that it would irreparably harm their criminal investigations, do you believe that it's going to remain sealed?
I do think the judge is going to keep it sealed. It'll be interesting to see what position Donald Trump takes tomorrow. I think his position is going to be, I want you to unseal this, Judge, because A, I think it's virtually certain it will remain sealed. That will enable Trump to say, hey, everyone, I wanted it out there for you, but DOJ wanted to keep it hidden from you as a political point.
But it would also give him and his representatives a clue as to what they're looking for and what evidence they already have.
It's no lose, because if it comes out, it's a roadmap, yeah.
So how difficult do you think it's going to be for the DOJ to balance this transparency and keeping this criminal information held, John? This is tough for them to be able to do.
Well, I don't, because I think what, and tonight, the Washington Post reported about 6 o'clock tonight, Eastern time, that Trump wants the affidavit released. He's not going to get it, as Ellie says, because it reveals the investigation, it reveals classified information, and it also will give him the witnesses. But anyway, I think the judge has got a pretty clear slate here, and he's just going to do what's right, and that is to keep it sealed, which is all the law in that circuit, as well as the rest of the country. So it's not a tough decision, not something. The other thing is, I don't think Trump can get together a motion. Apparently, he has no lawyer on this case specifically, and there's none has appeared on the docket yet, so I don't think he could even get a motion in by Friday.
Jennifer,
Thursday, excuse me.
Jennifer, you think it'll remain sealed as well?
I do. I agree with Ellie and John. There's no chance of it being released, and it's easy for Trump to call for it because he knows it won't be released. What he would like to do is see it himself, but actually not have it released publicly, because I got to tell you, there's going to be really damning evidence in there about the probable cause that led them to get that search warrant. So he really doesn't want it to be publicly released. He just wants to know personally what's in it.
I want to say, what does that mean? But we don't know because it's sealed. And are you saying that in order for them to get or to be able to do what they did, that there has to be some damning evidence in the affidavit, Jennifer?
Well, there has to be at least probable cause, right? They convinced a judge, an independent judge, that there's probable cause to believe that 3 different crimes, 3 different statutes, were committed, 3 different crimes were committed, and that evidence of those crimes could be found, guess where? In Donald Trump's home and his office. So that's pretty damaging. And I think when you actually see the affidavit, it goes through who told them what they saw, all of the information about the negotiations with his team that demonstrates that he knew what he had. Whatever they have on the Espionage Act that led them to charge that he had national defense information that may be misused, whatever led them to charge that there's obstruction there with the destruction of documents that don't belong to him, I think that is damaging evidence to Donald Trump. Again, we're not at trial. We're not talking beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't even have charges yet. But I suspect that whatever's in there that convinced that judge, Donald Trump actually doesn't want the world to see.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, John. Thanks, Ellie. Appreciate it. President Joe Biden signing a sweeping $750 billion health care tax and climate bill. But with the midterms just a few months away, will that be enough for voters?
Now law.
President Joe Biden taking a victory lap at the White House today after signing a wide-ranging bill designed to address the climate crisis, allow Medicare to negotiate lower prescription drug prices, and increase taxes on big corporations.
Today, too often, we confuse noise with substance. Too often, we confuse setbacks with defeat. Too often, we hand the biggest microphones to the critics and the cynics who delight in declaring failure, while those committed to making real progress do the hard work of governing. Making progress in this country is a as big and complicated as ours clearly is not easy. It's never been easy. But with unwavering conviction, commitment, and patience, progress does come.
President Barack Obama tweeting today, and I'm quoting here, "This is a BFD." Joining me now, Evan Osnos. He's a CNN contributor and the author of Joe Biden, The Life, The Run, What Matters Now. We know why he said that, right? Because when the former president, when Barack Obama signed the Affordable Care Act, Joe Biden whispered in his ear, the microphone was open, "This is a big," he actually said the word, so that's why he's saying that. Anyway, just to clear that up. How you doing, Evan? What'd you make of today?
I'm doing just fine. I was going to say, I'm not going to say it any better than Barack Obama did today. That's exactly what I deal with.
He said, listen, the current President Biden says that signing this bill is about showing Americans democracy still works, which is what he ran on. It's his, counter argument to all the chaos and the division of our politics right now.
Yeah, look, I will tell you, Don, I mean, at the core of Joe Biden's presidential career right now has been this idea, which looks, I think, to a lot of people almost naive, sometimes almost antique, the idea that you don't have to be cynical about politics, the idea that this system, which is so paralyzed, so frustrating so much of the time, can actually be wrestled into gear and can do what it's supposed to do. It's been 3 decades we've been talking about making a serious investment in combating climate change. And it hasn't happened until today. We've been talking for years about reducing drug prices, which have grown at times at 4 times the rate of inflation. Never happened until today. And the way it happened, Don, I think, is as much about how you go about politics and how Joe Biden has believed in this process, which is that even when somebody is driving you nuts, and I won't name names other than to say that it might be somebody who's a senator from West Virginia, that you don't then go out and say, I will never be able to work with that guy, because you just might need that person. And that's, in fact, what happened.
Listen, having said that, this bill took months of negotiation within the Democratic Party. But look at this picture from the bill signing. Joe Biden handing a pen to Joe Manchin. You wouldn't say the name, but there it is. And listen to what Manchin had to say about Biden today.
So we always had a friend relationship. And he always said, Joe, whatever I can do to help you, I will. I can be for you or against you. And that's a little thing that we use with each other, because sometimes it's better to be one way or the other. Anyway, so we've had that relationship.
Listen, there are progressives, there's Manchin, there's Sinema, all different factions within the Democratic Party. But even with those fractures, is the party holding together? Is he holding the party together, I should ask?
He's holding it together through brute force, in effect. I mean, actually, that's not the right word. It's really through managing these differences. It's by the refusal to say, I'll never talk to somebody who I disagree with on one issue or another. Joe Manchin and Joe Biden came very close to the edge of really dooming this domestic agenda. And yet the fact that they came back meant that there was still possibility. And look, there are certainly progressives who say we wanted more out of this bill. They didn't want to see more leases, for instance, on oil and gas on federal lands. But climate researchers will tell you that for every 1 ton that was created by those new commitments, essentially these sort of gifts to Joe Manchin, that we're taking 24 tons of carbon out as a result of these investments in new energy. That was the idea. And I want to just mention one other thing, Don, which is this is actually how Joe Biden got elected president. At one point, there was during the campaign, there were moments on the debate stage when he could have kind of pushed back harder. He could have maybe embarrassed somebody who'd said something wrong. And later, somebody said very close to him, said to me, the reason he didn't do that was because he knew that if he became the nominee, he would need those people in order to get anything done. And that is, in effect, the theory that obtains all the way to today.
But don't you think that Democrats realized at some point, listen, this is going into the second year, that they need the president just as much as he needs them? They need each other. If he goes down, they go down.
100%. I think that became clearer and clearer over these 18 agonizing months. This has been absolutely brutal. I mean, the fact is, it did undermine, I think, the party's credibility in the eyes of some voters who said, look, this was the crew that was going to be able to get something done. They control all 3, the White House, both houses of Congress, and they couldn't do it. Here we are today. It shows you how long a week is in politics. Just a few weeks ago, we were counting them out Here they are now. They recognize they had to get something done. And you're beginning to see some of that show up in the enthusiasm among Democratic voters. I mean, there's a long time between now and the November midterms, but the data is encouraging for Democrats, that Democrats who consider themselves progressives are beginning to say, look, okay, this administration, I may not agree with them on everything, but they're delivering on something that nobody's been able to do in a very long time. And there may be also some Republicans who are tiring of the Trump show and may begin to say, okay, you know, it turns out this Democratic president is not going to be captive to progressives. He just made deals with Joe Manchin. That's somebody I might be able to work with.
Some of the provisions of the bill Biden signed today don't actually go into effect until next year. But midterms are just months away, Evan. Voters don't have the patience. Biden's playing the long game. But politically, will he lose that game? Will he win that game? What do you think?
You're going to hear him and all the Democrats make a very stark contrast over the course of the next few weeks. They are going to say, you have a party against us that is rolling back Roe v. Wade, that is threatening same-sex marriage, that is rallying around a former president twice impeached, now once again the center of a federal investigation, or you have a party that is systematically, sometimes unglamorously, working to try to address issues which polls overwhelmingly show are the things that Americans care about, things like drug prices, things like now bringing down inflation. It's not going to happen overnight, but you just saw the latest inflation numbers. Gas prices are coming down. This is not going to be a case in which you have two parties that look very similar. You are getting an X-ray of these two parties right now, and the contrast from Democrats' perspective should be clear enough for voters to see.
We'll see what happens. Thank you, Evan Osnos. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Green lawns, long showers, open taps, all of that may be coming to an end in the Southwest. That's because of a major drought in the Colorado River. CNN is at Lake Mead next. Mandatory new water cuts coming to southwestern states. For the first time, the Colorado River will begin operating in what's called a Tier 2 shortage condition starting in January. That means that multiple states that rely on the Colorado River will need to find ways to reduce water consumption. But as CNN's Bill Weir reports, experts warn that these drastic cuts won't be enough to tackle the ongoing mega drought.
Whiskey is for drinking. Water is for fighting. That supposed Mark Twain quote has been a Western slogan since the first settlers. But now the worst drought in 1,200 years has water managers in 7 states, 30 tribal nations, and Mexico fighting over every precious drop.
But to date, the states collectively have not identified and adopted specific actions of sufficient magnitude that would stabilize the system.
That was the commissioner in charge of dams and reservoirs, admitting that upper and lower basin states have failed to agree on ways to cut their water use by up to 25%.
I think ultimately the states are going to realize they're playing Russian roulette, and they're going to have to come to their senses.
For almost 30 years, Pat Mulroy was in charge of southern Nevada's water and led an aggressive conservation campaign to tear up lawns, reuse wastewater, and scold water wasters.
Can't water in the middle of the day, ma'am. You'll be fine if you don't change your watering clock.
All measures she'd like to see happen downstream.
I think they're kind of kicking the can down the road past the election, if you want me to be very frank about it. I don't think anybody wants to make great public announcements about measures they may have to take prior to the election.
Rather than force new action, the feds will let the states keep talking, while the next round of automatic cuts will lower water delivery by 7% to Mexico, 8% to Nevada, and 21% to Arizona.
You can hear this crunching. It's just starting to dry up.
Here, alfalfa farmers are already being paid to let their fields go fallow, while some are switching to crops like Wyoming, a rubber plant that grows in the desert.
Crop switching, looking at lower water use crops like Wyoming, is one of the solutions we need to be looking at in a drier future to allow communities to sustain themselves.
Thanks to some creative water accounting, California will not face mandatory cuts next year, but their governor is already warning of a future with a lot more people and a lot less water.
The science and the data leads us to now understand that we will lose 10% of our water supply by 2040. If all things are equal, we will lose an additional 10% of our supply by 2040.
We have the very real possibility this coming year, if we have another lousy winter, all things being equal, that we will drive this lake down to elevation 1,000. That is 100 feet above dead pool, and you're at the bottom of the martini glass. So it doesn't take much to tip that over and get to the point where nothing can go downstream. And if you don't take it seriously now, if you think that you're going to avoid this, do a rain dance, go pray, do whatever, that we have a great winter, you're insane.
Bill Weir, CNN, Boulder City, Nevada.
Wow. Thank you, Bill. We'll be right back.
You might have heard of Carvana and that we sell cars online. What you probably didn't know is that we're in the business of making you happy. We believe buying cars should be something that gets you hyped up. That you should be empowered to shop when you want, where you want, wearing whatever you want. And that your new car ought to come with newfound happiness and zero surprises. So we promise that we'll treat you right, we'll put you in control, and all of us will stop at nothing to drive you happy. We'll drive you happy at Carvana.
Today we're going to see who can put on their shoes the easiest. Phil with regular shoes, or Claire with Skechers new Easy Slip-ins. Go! Done! Skechers hands-free slip-ins go on easy and stay on. Let's check on Bill. Try new Skechers slip-ins.
I feel refreshed because I'm not struggling with CPAP anymore. She looks great. I got Inspire. Great sleep at the click of a button. Did you get implants? Yeah, I got an implant, Sheila. It's Inspire.
Learn more and view important safety information at inspiresleep.com.
Fact, we all love video doorbells. Voice assistants have changed our lives. We now control our home with a touch. And you know what's better than all these things by themselves? All these things together from the most trusted name in security, ADT.
Waited all year for this.
No race?
Guys, stop fighting over me. I'm so excited for summer fun.
I'm just trying to find love out here, you know what I mean?
Our roads took us here.
All your summer crushes in one place. See where it takes you. Prime Video.
As families struggle with inflation, Congress and President Biden are doing something about it. Congress just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, reducing costs for millions of families. It lowers the cost of drugs and ramps up production of American-made clean energy. That means lower energy bills for families, jobs for our communities, and the boldest plan to take on climate change we've ever seen. The Inflation Reduction Act will bring relief to millions of people. Congress just got it done.
Dad, which one's your favorite?
I'm gonna go with Josh.
Yes. I'm sorry, what? I was talking about the types of chicken.
Come on, you know I love all my chickens. He is a really sweet kid, though.
Did you just fist bump?
One bite of Arby's Hush Puppy breaded fish strips, and you're transported to a classic Southern fish fry. One bite of those fries, and ooh, you're back at Arby's. Arby's, we have the meat.
This is the planning effect. This is how it feels to know you have a wealth plan that covers everything that's important to you. This is what it's like to have a dedicated Fidelity advisor looking at your full financial picture, making sure you have the right balance of risk and reward, and helping you plan for future generations. This is the planning effect from Fidelity.
We're a different kind of dentistry. One who believes in doing anything it takes to make dentistry work for your life. So we offer a complete exam and x-rays free to new patients without insurance every day. Plus, patients get 20% off their treatment plan. We're on your corner and in your corner every step of the way. Because your anything is our everything. Aspen Dental, anything to make you smile. Book today at aspendental.com. Walk in or call 1-800-ASPEN-DENTAL.
With the intelligent control of all-wheel drive and the power of a 2.5-liter turbo engine, there's no limit to the places the 2022 Sorento can take you, and to the stories waiting for you when you get there. world's first storytelling machine, the 2022 Sorento. Kia, movement that inspires.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney, the toughest Republican critic of the former president in Congress, losing her primary to Trump-backed attorney Harriet Hageman. Cheney, the last of the 10 House Republicans who voted for Trump's second impeachment to face voters, now becomes the 8th who will not be returning to Congress next year. Here's what she said in her speech tonight.
I have said since January 6th that I will do whatever it takes to ensure Donald Trump is never again anywhere near the Oval Office, and I mean it. This is a fight for all of us together.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Good night.